Hello all of you beautiful people, Jules here for WhatCulture.com, and 'tis the season, my friends. Yes, it is time for those incessant jingles to start droning, and of course all of that glitter to fill every shop window possible, because we're coming closer to Christmas. But instead of the ho 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 of a big fat man in red, now it's ho ho holy hell, did you see somebody get their head decapitated by that guy covered in red? That's right, it's time to talk about ridiculous Christmas horror movies. And trust me, there are a lot of them. So with this in mind, let's get cracking. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are the most ridiculous Christmas horror movies. Number 7, Santa Claus. When a horror movie is sold with the words from the co-creator of Night of the Living Dead, you'd be forgiven for expecting something distinctly above average and sophisticated. However, much like with the biggest and most impressively wrapped gifts under the tree, best to lower those expectations pronto, because it's probably not going to be a PS5, it'll likely be a toaster oven. I can make grilled cheese though. Can't do that with a PS5. Anyway, writer-director John Russo's 1996 movie Santa Claus is an ultra-low-budget, shot-on-video trash fest which cast B-movie icon Debbie Rochon as a B-movie icon, currently in the production on an erotic horror movie called Scream Queen Christmas, which also, just to get meta, actually exists and was also directed by Russo, which utilised footage from this film. Weird. However, she and her fellow small-time Scream Queens find their daily routine of performing strip teasers in Santa suits interrupted when an obsessive fan dons a costume of his own and starts killing them off one by one. It's thinly plotted, terribly acted, with production values lower than your average wedding video, and probably wouldn't even qualify as a feature length were it not for the numerous extended seasonal striptease sequences. It's not a masterpiece in the slightest, but you know what? It is still fun to watch. Number 6, Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. 1984's original Silent Night, Deadly Night is perhaps the most notorious seasonal slasher movie of them all. Centered on a traumatized young man who dons a Santa suit and goes on a killing spree on Christmas Eve, it proved hugely controversial on release in the US, but has long been a festive favorite for cult audiences. However, its 1987 sequel has a notoriety all of its own. Casting Eric Freeman as Ricky, the younger brother of the original's Billy, Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 is for the most part a direct retread of the first film. And for once, we're not just speaking figuratively here. Almost half of the film is literally recycled footage from the original, as the first 45 minutes show Ricky recounting the story so far to his therapist. And as if that wasn't cheap, tacky, or lazy enough already, that is nothing compared to how things get when the new story kicks in. Ricky makes his big brother look like the picture of mental health, killing people in ridiculous ways whilst laughing in a manner so theatrical that even your average pantomime villain would be telling him to take it down a notch. But of course, this film gave us the one absolute meme-worthy line that was Ricky walking along, shooting people in the suburbs while yelling, "Garbage Day!" That's literally the only reason to watch this film. Number 5, To All a Good Night. This 1980 slasher is in some respects a rather bittersweet inclusion on this list. For one, it's the sole directorial credit of the late David Hess, a horror exploitation icon thanks to his role in Wes Craven's seminal Last House on the Left. And for another, it's one of the earliest killer Santa movies, arriving the same year as the more highly regarded Christmas Evil. However, any way you cut it, To All a Good Night is a very feeble movie. A badly shot, badly acted, cookie-cutter stalk and slash movie from an era where such films were already ubiquitous. Were it not for Hess's attachment and the Christmas angle, it is doubtful that anyone would have cause to remember this at all. Slow-moving and for the most part painfully generic, it is not surprising that To All a Good Night isn't held up as one of the great first-wave slashers. Even so, any movie in which we get to see Santa Claus stab, garrote, and even decapitate his victims with an aeroplane propeller can't be a total loss. Number 4, Jack Frost. Just to take a breather from killer Santas now, this 1997 horror comedy gives a homicidal spin to another seasonal icon, the snowman. No walking in the air here though, I'm afraid, because in its place is a fair bit of stalking in the streets. Taking a cue from Child's Play, Jack Frost centers on a deranged serial killer who's on his way to his execution in a heavy blizzard, when a freak accident somehow transforms him into a living snowman. And he also has the power to shapeshift from solid to liquid to gas. Heading after the cop that busted him in the small town of Snowmonton, yes really, Christmas carnage then ensues. This cheap and cheerful bit of straight-to-video sleaze is infamous for two key reasons. It was the film debut of future American Pie star Shannon Elizabeth, and also has one of the worst and most gruesome deaths possible in a bathtub thanks to this killer snowman. It's not pleasant. And secondly, it arrived a year before 1998 family movie Jack Frost, which starred Michael Keaton as a dad reborn as a snowman, which when you think about it is a similar premise aside from the whole serial killer angle. And of course that meant that there were internet rumours abound of parents inadvertently renting the wrong version to watch with their kids, only to find out that this was a very different type of film. Number 3. Santa's Sleigh. This 2005 film from writer-director David Steinman isn't exactly a big-budget blockbuster, but by comparison with the bulk of the titles on this list, it's practically Dunkirk in terms of production value. Otherwise, we're now on familiar ground with another killer Santa movie, only this time it isn't some nutcase in a red and white suit with a fake beard. No, it's the real Santa Claus, who in this version of events is in fact the Antichrist, freed from a 1,000-year exile to wreak havoc on the world. His naughty list would seem to cover, well, basically everyone. And as you might expect, given the bigger budget, this actually has a few stars in, with WWE's Bill Goldberg as the most hulking Santa ever. Yes, even more so than Hulk Hogan in Santa with Muscles. It veers more towards comedy than horror and doesn't go as out there with the kills as slasher fans might have liked, but Santa's Sleigh is still a good bit of festive fun. Number 2. Nixon and Hogan Smoke Christmas. It's fair to say that none of the Christmas horror movies we've touched on thus far will be everyone's cup of tea. However, this 2010 no-budget effort from writer-director Kevin Strange is even more of an acquired taste, i.e. it is so completely tasteless it is hard to know where to begin. Titular duo Nixon and Hogan, who are recurring characters in Strange's bargain basement comedy horror films, are a pair of motor-mouthed stoners so dim-witted that the guys from Dude, Where's My Car look like Stephen Bloody Hawking by comparison. As such, they're hardly the people to be entrusted with completing Santa's rounds on Christmas Eve. Alas, this is exactly the duty they find themselves stuck with after jolly old St. Nick inadvertently smokes a toxic brand of weed that turns him into a zombie. Nixon and Hogan Smoke Christmas is unique amongst our Santa-centric titles here inasmuch as it doesn't actually feature Santa going on a killing spree. However, it does see Santa smoking joints, masturbating to porn, and getting sodomized. So yeah, it's not a horror in the traditional sense, but it's also an absolute horror to sit through. And number 1, Elves. This, astonishingly, is another Christmas horror movie that doesn't feature a killer Santa. However, you'll scarcely notice, considering how much glorious absurdity it squeezes into its 85-minute runtime. As you may have ascertained from the title, our main antagonists here are elves. However, these diminutive creatures aren't Santa's little helpers, they're the results of top-secret Nazi experiment from the late days of World War II, created as a part of bizarre plot, and we mean bizarre plot, to forge the fabled master race. As if killer elves and Nazi world domination plots weren't enough, there's a highly dysfunctional central family too. And I mean highly dysfunctional, as there's some creepy incestuous goings on. Yeah, you kind of want them to get killed here. And weirdly enough, some of these cast members seem to be taking this surprisingly seriously. Like, for example, the people who worked on the mythology of the Nazi elves. That's really in-depth, worryingly so.